Episode of Markvision, where we sit down with extraordinary people who've done extraordinary things. Can I have you give your name and a brief description of what you did in Vietnam?
Certainly. My name is Howard Baugh, and I flew KC-135s. We did the air-to-air refueling. Our airplane carried almost 200,000 pounds of jet fuel, and we could transfer out to any other airplane that could receive it. In Vietnam, I refueled mostly F-105s and F-4s, but we could also do bombers and transport planes, any type of airplane that was set up to receive the fuel from our airplane. We, like I said, 200,000 pounds of fuel, and we could either burn it ourselves and stay up in the air for hours and hours, or we could transfer it all, every bit of it. I did 2 tours in Southeast Asia during Vietnam, flying out of Thailand, a base Utapao in southern Thailand, and then Tak Ly Air Base in central Thailand.
Nice, very nice. So let's start from the beginning here. What was life growing up for you before the war, growing up, like high school?
I am the son of a Tuskegee Airman. My dad was one of the original who was part of the elite group of all black pilots and support personnel. Tuskegee during World War II trained 996 pilots, and 355 of them were transported overseas to the European theater. And you may have seen the movie Red Tails or the Tuskegee Airmen, the 1995 HBO movie. Yeah. My dad was one of those pilots. Growing up, we traveled a lot because he was military. I was born in upstate New York, and my dad was at Ramitelli at the time I was born. I was 6 weeks old when he finally came home after flying 136 combat missions and shooting down 2 FW-190 German fighter bombers. Yeah. But from there we went to Tuskegee, Alabama, where he was an instructor, and from there back north to Lockbourne Air Base in Columbus, Ohio. From there, my dad was an instructor at Howard University in Washington, D.C., where I started kindergarten. From there we went to Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and then overseas to the island of Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands, about halfway between Japan and Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. From there we went to Sacramento, California to McClellan Air Force Base, where I spent 5 years. Long time for military personnel. And from there back overseas to the Philippines. We spent 2 years at Clark Air Base in the Philippines. And finally back to Nashville, Tennessee. We spent another 5 years, where I graduated from high school. I went to 4 different high schools in 4 years.
What was that like?
It was a piece of cake. All that traveling, it was new environs, new housing, new friends, new schools, new everything. The one constant, though, was family. And it was the culture in my family, and I've got 2 younger brothers. It was the culture in our family that family first. And that's really important in the black community. When my ancestors were dragged over here in the bowels of slave ships, they were taken off the ships and put in open stockades so that they could observe the family clusters in order to break them up. Because you break the family, you break the spirit. Right. So that's why in the black community, family is incredibly important. Absolutely. And to this day, it is still #1 in my life. Absolutely. Family first.
For sure.
I Graduated high school, I did not know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Graduated from Pearl High School, went to Tennessee State University, and I majored.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before you get to high school, there was a story you told me about you being in the 6th grade.
Oh, yeah.
And your teacher asked you what you wanted to be.
When I was in the 6th grade, I was the only black kid in that class, and this is at McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento, near Sacramento, California. We had to write a paper about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I wrote about, I wanted to be a pilot, like my dad. Well, my teacher came to me and said to me, it's well written, but highly unrealistic. She says, there are no colored pilots, you can't fly. And I said, but my dad's a pilot. And she said, and she laughed. She said, no, just because he's in the Air Force doesn't mean he's a pilot. I said, I know he's a pilot, I've seen him fly. And she didn't believe me. I did not tell my parents about my conversation with my teacher because I was afraid they would dump on her, she would dump on me. But I brought my dad to class in his flight suit with his helmet. It was on career day, and there was lots of kids brought their parents to the school to do a presentation. I watched my teacher during my dad's presentation, and I don't think she believed a word of it. And she wasn't an evil, hateful, nasty person. She just didn't know. It was the culture back then. Most people thought that because I was black, I couldn't do certain things that whites could. Right. Human beings are human beings. Yeah. We share the same genetic makeup no matter what the color of our skin is. A lot of people will marginalize blacks. However, don't let that stand in your way. Keep your eye on the prize.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you were talking about what high school was like, kind of coming out of high school.
Coming out of high school, I did not know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a dentist, but one of the reasons was my dentist was a really cool guy and he had a Corvette. Yeah. And I wanted a Corvette, so I thought if I was a dentist, I could get a Corvette. So I majored in pre-med biology at Tennessee State when I was a sophomore, age 19. My dad, who was the professor of air science, the commander of the ROTC detachment there at Tennessee State, woke me up early one morning. He was supposed to take 2 senior cadets up for a motivational flight. They had already had pilot training slots, and when they graduated, they were going to go off to pilot training in the Air Force. One guy called in sick. My dad says, I got the airplane, I got the slot. You're legal because you're in ROTC. You want to go for an airplane ride?
Right.
I said, yeah. So we get out to Seward Air Force Base near Nashville. The senior cadet is there. My dad took him up for about an hour and a half, and when he came back, he got on a bus and went back to TSU. I got in the back seat of this T-33 single engine jet trainer. My dad took off and just wrung me out. I got sick as a dog, and my dad couldn't see me because I'm sitting behind him, but he could hear me. He could hear me being sick, and he said I could possibly fly this thing straight and level for a while, and I said no. I said, as sick as I was, it was the thrill of a lifetime. I'd been in other airplanes, but nothing like the acrobatic stuff that he was putting me through. The 2 most important days of your life is the day you're born and the day you figure out why. And when we got back on the ground, and I changed my major the next, that was on a Saturday morning. On Monday morning, I changed my major. Just psychology, just to get out of school, but I no longer wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to be a pilot. I read and studied everything I possibly could about flying and about pilot. When I graduated, my dad commissioned me as a 2nd lieutenant. I went to Williams Air Force Base near Phoenix, Arizona. And when I graduated from pilot training a year later, my dad pinned his wings on me. They are in my house.
What was that feeling
case. Like? But
what was that feeling like?
What?
What was that feeling like when he placed the wings on you?
At the time, I was kind of in. I don't know what to think. I was thrilled to death that I made it through pilot training. There was a lot of bigotry, a lot of racism. There were a lot of the instructor pilots and the check airmen. I even heard I had a check airman come and tell me that I had failed a check ride with a 93%. And out of 100, I had a 93%, and the guy failed me. And he said that the reason he failed me was because he didn't feel I was safe. That's pretty vague. One of the other flight check airmen came to me and told me, he says, he failed you because he said I shouldn't be there. That the colored should not be going through pilot training. I took a recheck and I passed and graduated from pilot training, but there was a lot of racism, and you knew it. But you don't take your eye off the prize. You got to keep on keeping on. There are always people who are going to treat you unfairly, marginalize you, and think that you cannot accomplish what you know you can. Nobody knows you like you know you, so don't listen to them. I didn't listen to them. Keep your eye on the prize. You can be anything that anybody else can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We all have obstacles. Not all of them because of the color of our skin. But we all have obstacles that we have to overcome. Keep your eye on the prize. Keep on keeping on.
Absolutely. So how long were you in the Air Force before the Vietnam War?
Let's see. I graduated pilot training in 1966. I went to Castle Air Force Base from Williams Air Force Base, Arizona. Castle was in Merced, California, where I learned to fly the KC-135. Flying different airplanes, it's not like getting out of a Chevy and jumping into a Ford. You got to go to school. Each airplane, the nomenclature, the handling, characteristics, everything is totally different. It's about a 3-month school. From there, I went to Loring Air Force Base, Northern Maine, where I was a co-pilot on the KC-135, and in 1968 is when I got called up to go TDY, temporary duty, to Utapao Air Base in southern Thailand to fly during the Vietnam War. And our job, mainly once we got over there, was to refuel fighters after they take off. They are so loaded down with ordnance, with bombs and rockets and bullets, that they can't carry a lot of fuel. But once they get in the air and get going, they come to us. They come up behind our airplane. We transfer fuel out of our airplane into their airplane, and they go to hit the target. Coming back from Vietnam, we were flying over Thailand, and to come out of Vietnam, they hit us again so they can get back to their bases in Thailand or in South Vietnam. We flew over the Gulf of Tonkin. We flew off the coast. I never went north of the DMZ. I never flew over Vietnam, but I listened to the fighters that went in, because we had the radio frequencies. We could hear what was going on.
Yeah.
And hit them, refuel them on their way back home.
Mm. And you said your first tour was 1968. Your
second tour was 1970.
Gotcha.
I went back, did the exact same thing, and that's a pretty safe way to go to war. We were up high, 35,000 feet or so, which is almost 6 miles up. But we would come down. The fighters are down close to the ground, and they would come up to like 12,000, 10,000 feet. We'd come down to refuel them, and then we go back up to safety.
Yeah.
And when we were down low, we were usually surrounded by a covey of fighters.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to shoot at you, and you got
Right.
F-4s and F-105s right there with you. So that's a fairly safe way to go to war.
Yeah.
They say war is hell. That doesn't describe it at all. I'll tell you about my very first mission. Took off from southern Thailand to Utapao, go up toward the DMZ, and we're going to a certain, it's called an anchor, and you fly in a circle and different fighters come. There's a coordinator that brings the fighters in to get refueled. I'm listening on the radio, and I hear an incident. There were 4 F-102s up at 35,000 feet, which is almost 6 miles up. 2 MiGs, 2 Vietnamese MiGs came up behind him and shot down. Jersey White 2 was the call sign. It's the second in a formation of four ship. Shot down, put a rocket into this F-102, and he begins to fall. Two of the F-102s, the Americans, chase the MiGs who go into China. We weren't allowed to go into Chinese airspace. But one of the F-102s followed the damaged F-102 as it's falling out of the sky. The pilot never got out of the airplane. The other pilot, who's in the good airplane, going down, flying with him, yelling at him to tell him to get out, to bail out. And then you could hear the terror in his voice. The pilot never got out of, Jersey White 2 never ejected, never got out. Went into a cloud bank and hit the ground. To this day, that was in 1968, to this day, Jersey White 2 is still missing in action. But it takes a long time. Seemed like forever for that airplane to fall from 35,000 feet with his buddy, his friend, screaming at him, begging him to get out of the airplane. I was the co-pilot. I turned my head to the window, tears streaming down my face, and I'm thinking, this is my first mission. I can't do this. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. I want my mommy. It's the scariest thing you can imagine. I can't put into words. I'm hoping that somebody listening to this can put politicians into place who won't waste American lives. War is hell? That doesn't describe it at all. Most horrendous experience of my life. And I finished that tour, 2 months, went home, my wife and kid, came back 2 years later, did the same thing again. War is hell.
Was it easier that second time you came back?
No. Well, you still have apprehension. I don't think I was ever shot at.
Yeah.
I did see lots of SAMs, surface-to-air missiles, but they weren't shooting at me. They were shooting at fighters and would miss, go up, run out of fuel, and fall back to the sky. Or we had the capability of when a missile was fired and it was being guided from the ground via radar, that the F-105's Wild Weasels had the ability to home in on where that signal was coming from that was guiding the missile and blow up the site. So a lot of times the Viet Cong would fire a missile and then shut everything down. So the missile was ballistic. It wasn't being guided. And so I saw missiles, we could see them, it was like a white telephone pole. And but I don't think I was ever shot at.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever got ground fire because we were too high.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fairly safe way to go to war.
Yeah, absolutely. So from your perspective, why did this war start and why did the U.S. become so heavily involved?
That's a good question. And I'm really not sure. But the main purpose was to stop the expansion of communism. North Vietnam was a communist country and it was trying to overtake South Vietnam. And we were trying to prevent that, and I even heard a guy say one time, where are we going to stop communism? San Francisco, Los Angeles, Honolulu, we got to stop it where it is. And that's what we were trying to do. But there were so many restrictions on going to war. I was in the Strategic Air Command in SAC, S-A-C, and we flew combat support. So this hand didn't know what this hand was doing. But I think the main reason that we went there was to prevent the spread of communism. Yeah. And why we left, God only knows.
Yeah.
I'm just glad. I lost friends there. I lost guys that I went to pilot training with. I heard Gunfighter 3 which was a an F4, get target fixation. Was flying in on a bombing mission or a rocket mission, and never pulled up.
Yeah.
He flew right into the target, right in the ground. All the Marines, the Army personnel around him were just horrified, and they're getting on the radio, screaming and yelling, and just every day you hear stuff like that. We had lots of we had 3 different radios, so we're listening to the war, listening to our command posts, so that we could rendezvous with the fighters that we had just refueled, so that we could hit them again coming off the targets. And so we're constantly, and at night you can see tracers, rockets, gunfire all over the ground. And I'm thinking, I sure am glad I'm not walking through that. But it's scary.
Definitely. Do you ever have survivor's remorse? You said you went to battle with some of the people that you got trained with, and they didn't make it back, unfortunately. So do you ever think back and...
Yeah, I had a family to come home to. My mother and father, and my dad had been to war, and he flew combat support during Korea, in addition to flying in World War II. I went to the 4th grade at Kwajalein Island in the Marshall Islands during Korea, and he flew SA-16 Air Sea Rescue, the Albatross amphibians. So he served his time. I did 2 TDY tours in Vietnam, served my country. Just fortunate that I'm one of the ones that made it back.
Yeah.
Remorse? No.
Yeah, I got you. And you also said there's so many restrictions to war.
There were so many restrictions in Vietnam. I understand that if you saw if the fighter group saw a target of opportunity, they had to check with command posts. And by the time they got the communication done, target of opportunity is gone.
Right.
And that's just something I heard. I'm not really sure. I wasn't privy to that. There was a lot of we did a lot of fighting. I'm thinking, of course, I'm not in the Pentagon, but I'm thinking the Navy's got those ships. They could have gone off to the coast of North Vietnam and just lobbed ordnance into Hanoi and just wiped the whole thing out. Why didn't they do that? Why did we do? But then I'm not in the Pentagon. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
I'm just the cog in something turning, and I got a job to do. I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability.
Absolutely. And I know you said that your dad was a huge influence for you. When you came back from your tours, did you have more of an understanding of what he went through?
Absolutely. My dad had talked about being nervous on every single mission that he flew, and he flew 136. We have a website, if I may. It's www.hbc-tai.org. Check out that website. A lot of information about the Tuskegee Airmen, which my dad was one. But my dad had talked, he didn't bring the war home. He didn't talk about it. The first time I ever heard the term Tuskegee Airmen, I was in pilot training. We were all sitting, we were new, just got to Williams Air Force Base. We're sitting around the table. The instructor asked each new student, why are you here? How did you get here? And I told the story about my dad taking me for a ride in a T-33, and the guy says, what? Your dad took you up in a T-33? I said, yeah, he was the commander of the ROTC detachment there at Tennessee State. And he says, your dad was a Tuskegee Airman? And I said, well, he went to Tuskegee and he was an airman. Yeah, I guess so. It's the first time I heard the term. I went to pilot training with a lot of guys from the Air Force Academy. They knew almost everything about the Tuskegee Airmen. I didn't know very much at all. Yeah. Even though I knew a lot of the pilots, because anytime anyone would come to town, come over to the house for dinner. So these guys these academy graduates are asking me all these questions about the Tuskegee Airmen. I'm taking notes so I can call my dad at night to get the answers. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Now I know a great deal about the Tuskegee Airmen. But I was very proud to follow in my dad's footsteps and become a pilot. My dad is also the one who told me that if I wanted to make it rank in the Air Force, I was going to have to get out of the cockpit. If I wanted to stay in the cockpit, it'd be wise to get out of the Air Force. I had an opportunity that he did not have. I always wanted to be an airline pilot. It's so much safer than going to war. I never got shot at flying with Eastern Airlines and United Airlines. Pretty safe.
Yeah.
But I had an opportunity that my dad didn't have. My dad tried to get on with the airlines in the late 50s and the early 60s and was always refused, saying that they couldn't get anybody to fly with a Negro or colored pilot, which is not true at all. But there's a pilot, Captain Green, sued the industry and got on with Continental Airlines in the mid-60s, and they opened the door. So I had an opportunity. I knew that if I stayed in the military, I was going to go back to Vietnam, and quite possibly in a helicopter, which is a really dangerous job in war. I applied for every airline I could find an address for, and I got called by Eastern Airlines first. And I did the interview. I was just fortunate. In January of 1971, I became one of the first black pilots with the airline industry.
What was that feeling like?
That was wonderful. I really liked being in that uniform. There was a lot of people I flew with who doubted that I had any flight experience at all. They thought that Eastern Airlines was forced by EOC. They just to fill a quota, just take people off the street and put them in the cockpit. But that was certainly not the case. I had 1,500 hours of multi-engine jet and 5 years experience flying before I became a second officer on the 727 with Eastern Airlines. But and at Eastern Airlines, I met my bride, who was a flight attendant, and been married almost 45 years now.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. So history does tell us that the images of the Vietnam War were televised, and American citizens were actually against the U.S. being involved. Why do you think that is?
I think each individual has a different reason. As a collective group, I mean, nobody's in favor of war. But in some cases, it is a necessary evil. I'm hoping that someday it will not be a necessary evil. War is hell. I was really angry, disappointed, because I knew my reception coming back from war was not going to be good, except we landed at Loring Air Force Base, where everybody was involved. And so with open arms and everything, but I still, I mean, we have television, I can see what's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that these people don't understand. Or do I not understand? Puzzling.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you started to talk about your return from Vietnam and the reception. Like, what was it positive? And
it was, because I was on an Air Force base with a bunch of other Air Force personnel.
Gotcha.
We were heroes. We'd been to war and come back.
Yeah.
I never considered myself a hero. I heard a lot of heroes. I met a lot of heroes when I was at Tak Ly Air Base in central Thailand. They had F-105s. Those guys put their lives on the line every time they lit that engine. And they were down and dirty. They were in the thick of it, on the front lines. And then hearing and seeing the troops on the ground, the Marines, holy smokes, first in, last out.
Yeah.
Good grief. The Army, the Navy, Air Force, all of the Americans who put their lives on the line to protect this great country in which we live. And it's not perfect,
Right.
but any of those personnel who put their lives on the line in service to this country, they are my true heroes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Was there ever a moment where you were at Vietnam, you were in the sky, and you felt like, hey, this might not go our way?
No, I would never allow myself to feel that way. Like when a football team takes the field, they don't ever think, I'm going to lose this.
Right.
When Muhammad Ali got in the ring, you think he thought, I might not win this one?
Right.
No, you don't allow yourself to do that.
I got you. No, I got you. Do you feel like the U.S. was equipped enough at the time to take on this type of conflict?
We had the equipment, yes, we had the ability. What was going on in Washington, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Not my job, not my
Right.
worry.
Right.
I didn't have any control over that.
Yeah.
But we had the equipment. I think we scaled down somewhat to fight that type of a war.
Right.
We could have dropped a bomb to wipe North Vietnam off the map.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that.
Right.
We had to fight the type of war that we could fight, but we were well equipped.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you spoke about the career you chose to move on from the military, well, the Air Force from, was an actual pilot, right?
I was a pilot in the Air Force. I was a co-pilot for many years, and then I upgraded to be aircraft commander. Aircraft commander, AC. I was the AC on a KC,
Yeah.
which is the first pilot. I'm responsible for the co-pilot, the navigator, and the boom operator who does the actual transfer of the fuel.
Yeah.
And I make all the decisions that have to be made. But I relished that. When I became aircraft commander, I really, ROTC, initial pilot training, everything is being trained to hone you to be a commander, to take charge, to be the one who is responsible.
Yeah.
And when I finally got to be aircraft commander, that was the prize that I had my eyes on all those years in the military.
Right.
And when I left the military and went to the airlines, you go through the same thing. I started off as a second officer, was this flight engineer who maintains the ship's system on a 727.
Right.
Then I became a co-pilot, and then finally the captain,
Yeah.
who was responsible for the airplane and all those passengers.
Right. Right.
I flew the 747, two different models, a 3-man crew and 2-man crew, the Dash 200 747 and the 747-400. Engineering masterpiece.
Yeah.
God, what a dream. Carried 300 passengers who are depending on you to get them from Chicago to Hong Kong without any instance, no problem. I was in a grocery store one time, and the manager knew me. I'm standing in the line, and he comes to me and asks me, where are you flying, Howard? What are you doing? And I told him about where I was flying and going on. The lady behind me says, oh my goodness, you're an airline pilot? That must be really exciting. I said, lady, I work really hard to keep it as dull and quiet as I possibly can. I don't want any excitement at all. And I worked really hard. I want you to get on that airplane and maybe go to sleep.
Right. So how long were you at United Airlines?
I started in December of 1989, and my last flight was December of 2003.
Oh, wow.
At age 60, then, government mandated age discrimination forced me to retire. Now they've changed the age to age 65, which didn't do me any good. They changed that after I had retired. But My dad got a ride in an F-18 with the Blue Angels at age 78. And we think that he is the oldest person to go up in an F-18. The actual pilot, Scott End, when he got back on the ground, came to me and said, "Your dad's absolutely amazing." He said he flew the airplane for about 45 minutes.
That's amazing.
He did all kinds of acrobatic F-18, and my dad said it was just the easiest thing to fly, especially compared to a P-40.
Right.
But the pilot said that my dad flew a loop where you start down and you come up over and go all the way across and start down the other end. The pilot said when we topped over and you could see the ground again coming up, my dad's sitting in the back seat flying. He said, "I could hear your dad laughing as he came over the top to come down." Who knows? I mean, you just can't give a number and say, okay, because you're 60, you're too old to fly.
Right.
I think the oldest person to have a pilot's license, I heard, was 103. And it was a farmer out in Nebraska somewhere who had a private license and had an airplane and his own airstrip.
Yeah.
Age is just a number.
Right. So after they could pretty much force you to retire because of age discrimination, like what did you do then? What did you turn to?
Well, somebody asked me the next day, "So how are you going to enjoy retirement?" Then I had to ask, well, who's responsible for that? Michael Jackson says, the man in the mirror.
Right.
You look in the mirror every morning, you see who's responsible for your day,
Right.
your week, your month, your life.
Right.
Yeah, one of my dad's favorite sayings is life is to enjoy. And I've enjoyed life. I got kids, I got grandkids. I'm really enjoying life.
Absolutely.
I'm busy now with the things that I do, being the spokesman for the Tuskegee Airmen chapter that I'm president of. That keeps me busy. I got grandkids keep me busy. Got hobbies and enjoyment. I don't remember. I'm glad I don't have to go to work now.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have time.
I bet.
I spend most of my time enjoying life.
Absolutely.
Because life is to enjoy.
Absolutely. And you also said you're a motivational speaker.
Yeah, on behalf of the Howard Baugh chapter, Tuskegee Airmen,
Yeah.
I talk to civic groups, to schools, to prisons, lots of high schools, church groups, and to perpetuate and to keep the history alive of the brave men and women of the Tuskegee Airmen who fought for a double victory, fighting an enemy overseas and racism and bigotry here in the United States. Second part of our mission statement is to motivate youth to be all that they can be. I don't care what they end up being, just be all you possibly can. We have, and you've heard of the STEM program, well, we call it the STEAM program because we have a bend toward aviation. Science, technology, engineering, aviation, and mathematics. A lot of kids don't think of aviation. I want to expose them to that. I flew airplanes for 42 years. If you can get paid for something you absolutely love, that's the way to do it. I tell the kids, don't chase money. Don't try to be the CEO or of some company that you're going to hate to go to work. I flew airplanes. I was handsomely paid for it. I could have made more money if I was a dentist, perhaps, but I enjoyed what I did. I loved being in the cockpit. I love slipping the surly bonds of earth and dancing the skies on laughter-silvered wings.
Was it hard to walk away from?
It was, yeah, it was hard to walk away from. But I knew I didn't have a choice. I could either, be miserable and sorry and sulk. They took away my livelihood, and they took away my fun.
Right.
I could move on.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to do. You just got to move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So just when you reflect over the time of all the things that you've done, from the Air Force to Eastern Airlines to United Airlines, what's one thing that you took away? Like, what's the one thing that stood out to you?
Both in the Air Force, I did a lot of time away from home. I love doing TAH, time at home, coming home to my family. The airlines, when I started with Eastern was a great airline to fly for. I was married to I am married to a former flight attendant. We had a nanny for a while. We had a daughter, and I loved. We had a nanny for a while, but then we decided that we're going to adjust our schedules so that when my wife is out on a trip, I'm going to be home with the daughter. Yeah. And when I'm out on a trip, my wife's going to be home with the daughter. Yeah. And sometimes on the Florida Turnpike, we're doing this. Yeah. You know? And I'm getting home so that when I can be there when my daughter gets out of school.
Absolutely.
I love being Mr. Mom. The TAH, time at home. I love being with family. We were fortunate enough that sometimes when my wife went on a trip, I would take the daughter and go on a trip with her. Yeah. And we'd go to places like New York and Las Vegas and have the layovers there, and we'd go on. I tell you, family is the core, is the unit, and that's as much I loved going to work. Wasn't really work. Yeah. I hate to even use that term. I love going to work, and I love coming home. Right. I'm the luckiest guy I know. Yeah,
definitely, definitely. And you have a grandson now.
I have. I got a grandson here in Virginia.
He wants to be a pilot.
Who wants to be a pilot? He has had flight lessons. When we lived in Florida, I had. In fact, he's my financial advisor. Had his own airplane and took us up a couple of times. Of course, me sitting in the back seat and my grandson actually at the controls flying.
That's awesome.
And he's in the 6th grade. He's 11 years old. I had no clue what I wanted to do when I was in the 6th grade. He wants to be a pilot now. He just might end up in a career that hasn't even been invented yet. Right. And how do you prepare for that? You go to school to learn how to learn. Right. My dad was a fighter pilot, a flight instructor, an administrator, a teacher, professor. He had a degree from Virginia State University in physical education, in PE. Yeah. I've had 4 jobs in my life. In high school, I was a wrangler. I worked at a dude ranch. I was a waiter, I was a lifeguard, and I was a pilot. I have a degree in psychology. You go to school to learn how to learn. Right. If you learn how to learn, you can learn anything. Yeah. Just get as much education as you possibly can. There are some people, like James Brown didn't even finish high school, but he knew what he wanted to do and he did well at it.
Absolutely.
Sean Combs left Howard University. He had a dream, going out to LA, become a big time record producer, mogul. How many Sean Combs are there? How many James Browns are there? Your best bet is education.
Right. Yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah, it can be done. Odds are kind of against you.
Yeah, definitely.
But your dreams are valid. Pursue your dreams. Otherwise, they're just dreams. You got to make them a reality.
Absolutely.
It takes hard work. It takes luck. It takes perseverance. Keep your eye on the prize. Stick-to-itiveness.
Absolutely.
Don't let anybody get in your way. We all have obstacles and mountains to climb. Right. And I tell students, once you reach your mountaintop, and you will, then turn around and help the next person in line. Because that's what we do. And that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sitting down for me. Appreciate your time. It was an honor to be here. What do you want to leave them with? What's the last thing you want the audience to know?
Be all that you can be. Whatever it is, just don't chase money. Chase your dream. We all come here with some kind of talent, something that you absolutely love to do. Figure out a way to turn that into a career, into a vocation. That is what I take it away from. And the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen carried the torch. In 1948, President Harry Truman desegregated the military, signing Executive Order 9981. It didn't happen overnight, but I think it's part of the beginning of the civil rights movement. The year before, there was Jackie Robinson. He carried the torch. He integrated Major League Baseball. There was Rosa Parks, carried the torch. Rosa Parks gone. There was Martin Luther King, carried the torch. We are all guilty of seeing wrong and stepping back instead of stepping forward and saying, hey. And that's what these people did. The Tuskegee Airmen, Jackie Robinson, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and many, many others stepped forward. Most of the Tuskegee Airmen are gone now. Jackie Robinson's gone. Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, they're all gone. Who's going to carry the torch now? Look in the mirror. You pick up the torch. Be all that you can be. Thank you.
Who that be?